Welcome to the With Winning in Mind podcast, everyone. I'm Heather Sumlin, along with my brother, Troy Bassham, and we're having a discussion today about training. Last week, we interviewed one of Troy's clients, golfers, who really changed the way that he trained based on what Troy was giving him and talking to him about. So we want to dive into some training techniques and see if we can help you advance your game, no matter your sport.
What did you find most interesting about that interview when it came to training and how he talked? Because you're not a golfer. Yeah. You're outside, so you're hearing this, and sometimes you'll pick on things that I won't pick up on.
Well, I think I find it fascinating that someone can reach such a high level of skill and then work with you on the mental side and then change what they're doing to earn and gain more skill. And I find that a little bit fascinating because he said that you revolutionized the way that he trained, that he used to do maybe what other golfers do. They just kind of like pull a ball and hit it and pull a ball and hit it. And there's no strategy. It's just let me get the feel, let me get the feel, let me get the feel. And then you were talking about, wait, we can combine the mental processes with the training schedule and kind of be a more balanced player based on how we train.
Yeah, there's really three things that he hit on that I think were really, really important from what we teach our athletes. And one is that you have to have a training schedule and stick to it. Well, he already has a training schedule, stick to it. But what we talk about is it organized in a specific way? Most people just organize it in a way that's convenient, not in a way that actually is going to build them and make them better. So that was one. He kind of hinted on that one, is like it really elevated my organization of how I train. Leads into the second one, which is anytime you're going to train, you must build self-image at the same time you're working on skill. So one of the ways that we do that is we focus on training the process. How do you train the process? And so the third one was when you're training, if things are going really well, do you move on to the next drill that you have planned, or do you keep doing what you were doing?
Well, I don't know. What do you do?
And so we focus on the principle of repetition, which is if things are going well, keep on going. You know, if you're playing well, keep on playing kind of approach is what we have.
But don't you think most people do the opposite of that? Like, I'm training really well. That means I don't need to work on this anymore. I need to go to the thing that I'm not doing well at.
Most will actually work really long hours on what they're not good at and almost take what they're good at for granted.
And then what they're good at lessens a lot of times.
I had a player once, this was years ago, and this is a successful individual. I mean, this person had won at the highest level in their sport, and he was a golfer, and he said that if he hit the driver 5 times in a row really well, he put it in the bag. His idea was, I don't even want to risk that mojo going away. I'm going to keep that. Boom.
Oh.
But if he wasn't hitting a particular iron, let's say 5 iron, he wouldn't hit it well, he'd sit there for 5 hours hitting it until he figured out how to fix it. And so in our view, in that case, that individual is getting really good about getting really bad. Because think about it from an imprinting level. Most people don't look at it from an imprinting level. Most people look at it from a skill level, subconscious. You know, if I'm not good at something, what do I have to do? Well, if you want to get really good at skill, it's just 2-part series. One is you have to get quality instruction from a quality individual,
right?
A high quality coach. Take their instruction, and then do number 2, a lot of repetition. Well, but we're not talking about the beginner here. We're not talking about the guy that's trying to become good. We're talking about people who've already gotten at least to an intermediate level. So they're somewhat good at what they do, but they're not great yet. They're still working towards that. So we work with a lot of individuals that are high school that want to get into college. So there's a gap there that they're trying to go to. Same with college players that go to professional athletes. Sometimes you'll see a gap. Like this was interesting. I was talking to our dad yesterday. He's working with a hockey player.
That's always interesting talking to dad.
Yeah, talking to him yesterday. He was working with a hockey player.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, what's really cool is he knows nothing about hockey. Our dad knows nothing about hockey. He doesn't even know how many people are on the ice. He's coming to him because he was really good, very talented, really good, meaning he was dominant in little, Then he goes into high school. He's dominating select. And then he goes into the college level, and he winds up getting around a bunch of other hockey players that are
really
equal
good.
to him.
Right.
So the skill's not going to go away.
Right.
So what's being affected? Self-image is being affected. Okay, well, what's Landy Bassham famous for? Building self-image.
Well, and I think it makes sense too that like if you're a big fish in a small pond your whole life and you're like at the top of the food chain, and then you jump into college where now you're a little fish in a big pond, or you're kind of at the same level as everybody, that's going to take a hit.
Well, you have somebody determining your ice time.
Yeah.
Do you get to get in the game?
Right.
And you're not getting the game, and your whole career, not only did you get in the game, you started the game, you stayed in the game.
Yeah.
Now he's not. How do you handle that?
Right.
And you've got guys that are on the team that are literally that you're playing with. The end of the year are going into the NHL draft and will be drafted. They're that good.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's a little bit of a harsh reality when you face that. Well, a lot of people are going to face that somewhere in their career as they're going up and up the ladder. You're going to get to a point to where you're going to hit where, okay, wait a minute, I got to rethink this.
Yeah.
And so he's struggling with, okay, how do I handle that? Because I just don't feel as confident. I don't know how I handle this. I'm getting a little bit frustrated. These are things that he never experienced before. Well, if you talk to Dad, he's going to tell you, he goes, well, this is going to happen to your life anyway.
Absolutely.
And so once we had that conversation of, okay, why is he coming to you? What's he talking about? And he explained that to me. The realization is, do you really need to know the sport? No. What he needs to know is he needs to know, okay, how do I help build this guy's self-image to where it needs to be, so next year when he goes back into college, now he's one of the guys that shine just like he did in the past. Now, it's not going to be that difficult, I don't think, because the guys had tons of success in the past. But now you take this concept, which is basically self-image is what we're talking about. And what was Kevin talking about training? He's like, you train in a way to help build and protect self-image.
Right.
So the two primary ways we do that is one, through the principal repetition. So in this case, let's just say that he decides in advance that he's going to putt first, then he's going to go chippy, and then he's going to go to the driving range and work on ball striking. So he's going to do those things. And to make it simple, let's just say he's going to do an hour each time. 3-hour block of training sounds pretty good. He goes and he does the putting, and then he goes over to chipping. But chipping is going better than most days.
Okay.
The principal repetition would say, keep doing it.
So extend it.
Extend it for maybe an hour and a half instead of an hour.
So what if putting was
2
not
hours.
going well at all?
Then you change up the training.
Then you go into chipping and come back to putting later.
Correct. So he would go to, okay, 10 minutes in, it's not going well. Okay, go to chipping, go to the driving range, then come back to putting. 9 times out of 10, putting's better.
It like fixes itself.
Correct. So when you're working in sports that have multiple skill sets, like golf does, or like in my sport, we had prone, standing, kneeling, 3 different positions. Okay, well, if one position's not going well, just change to the next one, come back. It's amazing how many times you come back and you're like, why am I holding better? Why am I shooting better? Like, you have no idea.
Is it because your self-image grew in the other positions? And so you're like, oh, I do know how to shoot. I'm actually really good at this. And then you forget whatever was going on before.
I think that's a good point. It's fair to sit there and say that, well, what if you did well in those two? You come back to the other one, you're sitting there going, like, well, this is ridiculous. I know how to do this.
Yeah,
and then you just do it. The other thing I think is because you're focused on the other positions, you're not dwelling on why something is not going the way it should. In other words, you're not focusing on the problem. Then when you come back, you're more solution-minded rather than problem-solving, which I'm not really a big problem-solver guy. I'd rather find the solution than try to fix a problem. Because me, if I fix the problem, I'm focusing on what's wrong. If I'm focusing on the solution, I'm trying to focus on what's right. And so now you're in that mindset. Then if you just stay there trying to work on it, I think you just get frustrated if you did. But training in a way in which you build confidence or you change up the training to protect self-image, I think is key to success of any athlete. So that was one thing that, Kevin just never heard of it. He's like, you got to be kidding me. He's like, I've been doing it wrong. Well, most people, if you don't understand self-image, if you don't understand the performance model, that would make sense why you would train like everyone else trains.
And don't actual imprints imprint the strongest because you actually did it?
I believe so.
So therefore, if you're actually performing well and you extend that practice before you get too tired, like you cut out before you get too tired or whatever, so you're getting more and more and more and more actual imprints.
Yeah.
And your self-image is...
Yeah, because if you went beyond where you got tired, then you defeat the purpose of it.
Right.
Yeah. You have to be able to figure that balance. And it's different for different people. You have some people that might just extend 15 minutes. Others might double the amount of time they're working on something.
I think it's different for different sports, too, because if you're in a sport that's really hard on your body, like gymnastics or something like that, there's only so many times you can actually do a skill before it might be detrimental. So I could see that, but at least doing it a few more times to try to get those really good imprints in. Smart.
Yeah. The other thing he brought up that I thought was really interesting was training the process, where he talked about everybody in golf has a pre-shot routine.
Right.
But how many people actually train it?
What do you mean? Like they don't actually work on it?
If you go to a golf tournament, like if you and I went to a junior golf tournament, and I'm talking about one of the higher end ones, like AJGA, and we watched these players warm up on the driving range, because they all warm up on the driving range.
Oh, I see what you mean.
None of them are
They're
doing a
just,
pre-shot routine on the driving range.
Hitting
None
balls.
of them. Exactly.
They're not actually running their pre-shot routine when they're hitting balls.
Correct.
So
they
if you're
wait
a
till they get the
golfer
first tee box.
and you have a pre-shot routine, you should do it all the time.
Yeah. You should train it. And so the question, well, how much time should I do that? Well, it depends on the level of player. So if I'm working with a player that, let's say they're 80, they shoot in the 80s.
Okay. I thought you were going to say they're 80 years old. I was like,
no, they shoot in the 80s.
Impressive.
So the score is somewhere between 80 to 89, right? 80 to 90.
So for those of us that don't play golf, that's a decent score?
Decent.
But not if you're on...
You're not going to win anything shooting that score.
I got you.
But it's not like you definitely know how to... I'm talking about legitimately shooting an 80 to an 85, something like that, right?
So you know how to play.
If you're legitimately shooting that score, then you know how to play.
Right.
But you're not good enough to necessarily win like you want to, because par is 72. So you want to get close to par or be under par. So if you're shooting in that, it makes sense the person probably doesn't have the skill set that they need. So they need to spend more time training that skill. We call that training for feel. So I'm hitting a lot of balls. I'm trying to get the feel down of what my coach is trying to get me to do. I just haven't got the repetition mastered where I can do it every single time. Maybe I do it 50% of the time, 60% of the time, but there's a good percentage I'm not doing it. Well, in that particular player, I'm going to say, look, if you take 25% of your time and train your routine, and the other 75% training the process of actually getting the feel down like you want, that would be better than doing 50-50. Now, once you got to where you're shooting high 70s, mid to high 70s, you're like, okay, well, what about that player? Well, that player understands the swing better, so the imprint and the practice swing, because most of them take practice swings, it's going to be better. The quality of that practice swing is going to be better. So therefore, the imprint's better. Therefore, they don't need as much repetitions. They need to be actually preparing for the round itself. Now you take a player who's a professional, how much time do they need to be training on skill? You could argue maybe even more training for the shot versus feel would be necessary. The point being, there needs to be a balance. You need to train the process as well as training for your skill.
So break, because I got a little lost, but I don't do golf. Training for feel is when you're lots of repetition without the mental process connected in order to get the feel of what you're doing. But not everybody needs to do that all the time, because once you have the feel, then you should be training for the shot, which is implementing the mental process with the technical every time.
Correct. So training for feel is more about quantity of doing something, because they don't do it well enough to get quality training. Where training for the shot, in this example, would be more quality, not so much quantity. So if you look at rifle shooting, a mistake most young shooters make is they want to shoot for score all the time.
Wow.
So they'll go to the range, they'll shoot a few sighters, and they want to shoot for score. But they don't understand what it means to shoot a good score. They don't know how to do it. But that's what's fun. What's fun is to do it for score.
You want to measure yourself, right?
Correct.
Okay.
But they don't approach the target correctly. They don't settle correctly. They don't establish the position. They don't follow through correctly, which means they probably don't call the shots accurately, which means they're not going to make the adjustments necessary to improve the probability of getting a good score. Mm-hmm. So if I'm working with a beginner, I'm like, no, you're not shooting any scores. Well, they don't like that because I'm having to approach drills, fall through drills, holding drills. All those things are boring. Mm. Well, that would be like, hey, take the golfer. You say, here's some balls. Put a towel, 30 paces down, and I just want you to just putt and try to put it on the towel. Put the ball to the towel for distance control, right? Well, how much fun is that? It's more fun to read a putt and try to make a putt. That's more fun than just doing this drill over and over and over. But why are all these drills being required by all these players? Because these coaches realize that helps them establish skill. And so once you have skill, the imprint in the preload is much more accurate, and it's better, and it sets them up for the shot better. To where if they don't know what they're doing, they're just swinging. So how are you going to get the best score if you're not preparing to get the best score? And this is what I'm coming from the standpoint of, are you training to win, or are you just practicing to compete?
And then define the difference in your opinion from practice to train.
So to me, practice is when you go work on your skill, but you really don't know what you're going to do until you get there.
Like there's no plan.
Correct. There's no plan.
And so then there could be a lot of jibber jabber with other people, or hit a few balls here, do a little bit there, but you don't have any structure.
Yeah. So my example, for my sport, I go to the range and I said, I think I'm going to do prone first today.
Mm-hmm. But there's no
reason. And then
reason.
after prone, then I'll go to standing, and then after standing, I might say, you know what, I'm shooting pretty good standing. I think I'll go shoot air gun. But the purpose I'm going to the range is to practice. Okay, I want to get better. Where to me, training to win would be, before I leave the house, I know exactly what I'm doing in the order I'm doing it. Mm-hmm. And I understand why I'm going that order. So what I used to do is, unless the weather was really good, okay, which normally this time of year it's not, it's windy, hot, kind of muggy kind of thing, right? So I would get to the range early, and I'd do air rifle first because that was my best event.
Right, so start with what you're good at.
That's what I'm good at. I'm going to start with what I'm good at, so then I'm feeling good about it. Then I'm going to go over to the small ball range where we shoot 22, which is 50 meters, which is an outdoor range. Mm-hmm. Now the sun's up. I'm ready to go. I shoot. I want to get done before noon because it's going to get blistering hot in the afternoon. So I do a little bit of prone because it's the easiest one to do. And then go right into either kneeling or standing, depending on what's going better or what needs work. And then end on what's good. So to me, I would go more progressive approach where I'm going to start with what I'm good at and then work toward more difficult. And if I ended on something that was difficult, which for me often was kneeling in my career, if it didn't go well, I would then finish up maybe shooting some more prone or something like that, to where I feel like I got a good training session. But it's organized in a way to where I'm trying to build confidence at the same time I'm trying to work on skill. Most athletes don't do this. In some cases, like in team sports, it's difficult because you got a team environment. It's run by other coaches and so forth. But in individual sports, this should be number one priority. Make sure you organize your training in a way that it builds and protects self-image. At the same time, you're building skill. If you do that, how much better are you going to get? So when you look at Kevin, it's like, man, I'm playing much more consistent now than I've done before. Well, one reason is because the training is so much more effective.
It's like purposeful.
But you would have, I'm sure this happens in all other sports, whether it's figure skating or pageantry or, other individual sports like tennis and so forth. I mean, can you adjust what you do to make it to where you're building confidence? And I would argue, yes, you can do that. And I'm amazed at how many people just don't even think about it. But then we grew up with that, talking about self-image, how important it is. You got to build it and that kind of stuff. Should have listened better when I was a teenager, though. Didn't do a very good job of listening.
Too.
Yeah.
Me too. I don't think we realized how smart mom and dad were.
No, I don't think most kids realize their parents know stuff until later on in life. And you're like, should have paid attention on this perspective. But I'm always amazed how our dad, Lanny, can look at someone, not really understand their sport, their activity, their business, but help them because he understands, look, they're not training, because you almost guarantee, no, they're not training self-image at the same time they're training skill.
Well, sometimes there's an advantage to not know as much. I know that when it comes to dog agility, so I work with dog handlers. I don't run dogs. I don't train dogs. And so, but I'm able to look at their situation from a different and unique perspective because I'm not in the sport, so I'm not trying to change their technique. I'm not trying to give them advice that is unnecessary for what they came to me for. So sometimes there's an advantage there,
yeah.
I think.
And I approach it, no matter what the sport is, okay, what tasks do you have? And do you have a system to follow within those tasks? If you don't, let's develop one.
Right.
But in those individual sports, in every case, the individual can organize their training in a specific way that helps benefit them. Now, it's going to range from how much they can and can't do. Like you were saying, some sports are much more difficult on their body, so you might not be able to work as many hours, throughout the week as another sport. But you still want to organize in a way to where you're gaining confidence. And that's what I like, is when I see a player change things up, it's like, wow, why does that work? Well, it's because we're doing it the right way.
In order to build self-image, you need to have more positive imprints than negative ones. And so the power of imprints makes the difference, so repetition makes sense. So if you're training in an individual sport, when you go out to train, extend the practice if you're going well. Put the thing that you do well in the front and in the end of your practice, and put the thing you're kind of not, your area of opportunity, should we say, in the middle. Have a blessed rest of your day. Like this if you do. Subscribe to our channel. Join our Patreon because we're going to deep dive into some more information.